Welcome to the Playoff Committee, everybody. I'm Chas Messman alongside Mac Friday and Evan Oscherwitz. The first rankings of the College Football Playoff Committee have come out now. A little bit of controversy at number one, but nonetheless, we are finally into the best part of the college football season. Upsets are all over the place. Conference rivalries finally heating up, and obviously, Alabama versus LSU this weekend.
Yeah, they want us to believe this is going to be a really great game. But I remember back in, 2011, these two teams met. They were number 1 and 2, and it was a 9-6 win for LSU in overtime. This could be a really slow game, and just get ready for that. But it should be a really good one.
I'm on the opposite side of the spectrum from you, Evan. I'm actually in favor of lots of offense. Game of the Century 2.0, I believe, is going to be significantly more offensive and more of a shootout than it was in 2011. Obviously, big defensive game in 2011, but
it's not going to be 9-6.
That's for sure.
That's just not going to happen.
That's
Joe
for sure.
Burrow and Tua, if he plays, they're not going to let that happen. Well, we do have a great weekend coming up, probably better than this past weekend. Obviously, there were still some great games, namely SMU getting beat at home by Memphis.
The Mustangs were undefeated before that one. Close game in the end, only 6 points separated the two teams. Really a shootout offensively, 54-48 final score. SMU playing without their number one receiver, Reggie Roberson Jr., missed the game with a foot injury. If he had played, the outcome might have been a little different. But Antonio Gibson for Memphis, my goodness, he went off 386 all-purpose yards, 3 TDs. If you're the Mustangs, obviously this one hurts. They had a chance to make history, really. This was their biggest game in 30 years, and it didn't work out for them, but they still have a chance to win their division and play for an American Conference title and potentially a New Year's Six Bowl. So for the Mustangs, it stings, but you got to shake it off and get ready for next week's game against East Carolina.
A team that did not avoid, or did avoid an upset, was the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Obviously, they got smacked in that Michigan game against what I thought was going to happen. Completely wrong on this podcast. I said they were going to win by multiple scores. That didn't happen. But, Mac, what were your impressions from that game?
Honestly, I don't think Notre Dame necessarily deserved to win that game. I mean, you just sort of sneak out necessarily. You sneak out with a win, a 1-point win with less than 30 seconds left, and you score that final touchdown. I feel like that's more painful than it is definitely contributing to their success.
Well, if you're Notre Dame, then you got to feel really lucky right now. I mean, Virginia Tech, I think they took this team really lightly. Obviously, Virginia Tech's not a slouch. They're 5-3 now. We're 5-2 before that game. Notre Dame had to rally late to win, and it's really just a snowball effect for the Irish. You know, you get beat very soundly by Michigan, one of your biggest rivals. So obviously there was a bit of a confidence issue going in, but you just can't allow that to happen. Even if they won the game, this doesn't bode well for them going forward, and they're really going to have to play better football next week.
And then Georgia showing that they really are a good team, trying to bounce back from that South Carolina defeat a couple weeks ago, beating the Florida Gators 24-17 in the world's largest outdoor cocktail party.
Georgia really rode their defense in this game. They held the Gators to 17 points. Florida really couldn't run the ball at all. And this is a statement win for Georgia. They're showing everybody that, hey, they're still in it. They might have the one loss, but this is not a team that should be counted out. Obviously, SEC has a lot of good teams. They're going to need some help to get back in the race, but with only one loss, they're definitely still in it.
You got to love Jake Fromm. Jake Fromm, he's a great quarterback for Georgia, had a great night that night, and although they may be a little bit outshined in the SEC by LSU, by Alabama, they're still a very solid option among the teams in the SEC East and the rest of the conference.
Going off that Jake Fromm point, 20 of 30, 279 yards and 2 touchdowns, I feel like that was the first game where he was allowed to let everything go through him. He put the team on his back. It wasn't just about the run game. The offensive play calling this year for Georgia hasn't really spread things out. They haven't really taken any risks. It's very conservative, cut and dry, underneath passes, a little bit of play action, and I want to see a little bit more out of Jake Fromm. We know how good he is. We know he can win the big games. We've seen him in the national championship performing at the highest level, and yet he's never been the guy. I want to see him be the guy, even though you have a guy like DeAndre Swift in the backfield who's going to be a first-round pick next year.
I mean, yeah, this is a criticism that's been levied against Fromm in the past. Obviously, he's not putting up the types of numbers that some other quarterbacks are. But at the end of the day, I think what matters is just winning the game, and they did that against a very good team down there in Gainesville. And like I said before, they're keeping themselves alive in the race. They're going to need some other teams to lose in order to get them back in that top four. But if they keep playing like this, they could definitely find themselves in that conversation come season's end.
Mac, who would you say your player of the week would have been from the previous week?
Definitely Chuba Hubbard from Oklahoma State.
Man's killing it this season. Already over 1,000 yards rushing prior to the game.
Putting himself, I'd say he's bubble Heisman watch right here. Like, I think he's putting himself in that race. Obviously, there's lots of contenders from all sides of the conference, all sides of every conference. But at the same time, I mean, he had a great, solid stat line. Over 200 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns. That's a good job for me.
Not to mention, like you said about the Heisman, playing for a bigger team or a better team in a more notable, maybe one pushing for the playoff, he would 100% be in that Heisman talk. 100%.
But he has definitely improved Oklahoma State's record. They're in the top 25 this week. I had them at number 25. But imagine what their record would be without Chuba Hubbard. I mean, the guy is putting up some insane numbers. They've been in some close games against very good teams. Like one of their losses was to UT back when UT was still healthy. This is a good team, but Chuba Hubbard makes them that much better, and I don't think he's getting enough recognition for the work he's been doing.
Who is your player of the week?
Like I said earlier in the show, my nod goes to Memphis's Antonio Gibson. I watched all 4 quarters of that game against SMU, and the Mustangs defense just simply could not stop him. 97 rushing yards as a wide receiver. That was all on 3 plays, 3 end-arounds, which all went for huge yardage. Huge day through the air for him. Brady White, their quarterback, was really good as well. Easily could have been
former
player
Arizona
of the week.
State Sun Devil.
Yeah, that one hurts a little bit, but Memphis is a very good football team. There's a lot of good football teams in the American Conference this year, and I like SMU a lot. It's a shame they couldn't get it done, but all the credit should go to Memphis. They played a great game in front of their home fans, and they're in a great position to win the conference right now.
For me, I'm going a little bit off the radar. I'm going with a guy, Wesley Kennedy III from Georgia Southern.
Sleeper. 13
carries, 145 yards, and 2 touchdowns as they took down Appalachian State, who at the time was ranked 21st in the country. Georgia Southern now has a record of 5-3. Big day from Kennedy. But now we're going to get into the show's rankings. Obviously, the college football playoff first rankings just came out on Tuesday. We're going to talk about that and compare ours, especially at the top of the bracket, if you will. But first, we're going to start through our 25 through 21. At 25, we had the Oklahoma State Cowboys. At 24, an American Conference team, the Navy Midshipmen. 23, and another American Conference team coming off a loss, the SMU Mustangs. 22, Boise State. And 21, Wake Forest out of the ACC.
So, Oklahoma State obviously has more losses than any other team in the top 25 right now, so it makes sense for them to be at number 25. They had some really good games, and they've had some not-so-great games. They're still trying to find that consistency. Obviously, we talked about Chuba Hubbard and how good he's been. The fact that they're in the Big 12 also takes away from it a little bit because it's not seen as being one of the really premier conferences. Of course, it's part of the Power 5 or Power 4 if you're one of the people that thinks that's a thing. But they do deserve to be in the top 25, just not any higher than 25.
I'm in agreement with you on that. I mean, Chuba Hubbard's the highlight star of that team, and he's going to continue to produce highlight plays throughout the rest of the season, and I think that's it for them.
The one thing you got to talk about, Oklahoma State, another Big 12 team, defense. They just, at times, it feels like they just can't stop the other team from scoring. And when you have a young quarterback like Spencer Sanders, and he's a little bit inconsistent as he has been this part so far this year, it's going to cost you games. And, when you're coming up against a team like Texas at the time, who you said was pretty highly ranked, going into the season, there were a lot of hype, including myself. You could say they are arguably the most disappointing team of the season.
Definitely not back. Texas is not back.
Yeah, I was wrong about that one again. So predictions for me, not quite there yet. Boise State and Wake Forest. Where are you guys at on that one? Because for me, I just see it like another Boise State team.
This has become sort of the norm with Boise State, just the de facto rulers of the Mountain West Conference. Great record every single year, always a tough team to play against, but because they're in the Mountain West, there's not a lot of other nationally recognized teams out there. It's kind of hard to gauge where they're at. But I like this team a lot. I think they definitely belong in the top 25. I'm excited to see what they do come bowl season. For me, that's really when we'll figure out if this team is for real or if they're a pretender.
Exactly, and a young quarterback, true freshman Hank Bachmeier, is just going to get better as the year goes along. Obviously, there have been his ups and downs, as there will be with any true freshman quarterback. We've seen it with Jaden Daniels here at ASU. You've seen it with Bo Nix down in Auburn, all over the place. And then, Mac, tell me a little bit about Wake Forest. How do you feel about them? Because they're at 7-1. It's just they haven't really played anybody.
You're right. They haven't really played anybody, and as their biggest challenge to prove themselves, obviously, is going to come up against that big matchup with Clemson coming up soon here. I don't really see them escaping much and becoming much better than they already are and standing where they're at. I mean, Jamie Newman's been a stud all year. Sage Surratt is just catching everything he throws to him.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really see much more for Wake Forest. Not a lot coming from them in their strength of schedule, and I don't know.
One thing I will say though is this is their chance to prove that they're for real. Clemson has looked very beatable at times this year. If Wake Forest wants to prove that they're really one of the best teams in the country, they're going to go out and win this game. But like Max said, they really haven't played anybody yet. Some of their wins are much less than impressive. They beat Florida State by 2. Their one loss is to unranked Louisville in a game they lost by 3 points. So they've been in very close games a lot of the time. And when you're playing a team like Clemson, that doesn't really bode well. So it'll be interesting to see what they do this week against the Tigers.
I'm going to push out a little scenario here. What would you guys say would happen in the rankings? Or how high would you think Wake Forest would jump up if in 2 weeks they did end up beating Clemson, assuming both teams won their games up until that point?
I think it depends on how seriously the committee really takes this Wake Forest team and puts aside sort of a superstar aura around Clemson. You get what I mean?
I could see them moving up between 5 and 10 spots. I would have serious qualms with putting them any higher than that, just because it would be their really only statement win up to that point. But they've also got into the top 25 without a statement win, so maybe they would be able to move up into the low teens. It's tricky, but I'd say at least 5 spots.
I'm in agreement.
Yeah, like you said, the Wake Forest loss to Louisville it's a bad loss. And you've seen with the way the committee's rankings have gone so far, with Clemson being behind Penn State, obviously they're weighing what they've seen this year. They're not really looking at the talent or, who we thought they're going to be. They're not thinking about, Trevor Lawrence last year, what he did, all these great things. They blew out Alabama in the national championship. They're not really taking that into account. Obviously, we'll get into that a little bit later once we talk about the top 6. But as we move into the top 20, we start off with 2 group of 5 teams again with Cincinnati and Luke Fickell's boys at number 20, number 19, Memphis, obviously coming off that win against SMU, number 18, Iowa, number 17, Minnesota, and number 16, Kansas State. Iowa and Minnesota, 2 Big Ten teams. Iowa, for me, I just see it as more of a typical Iowa team. Nate Stanley doesn't do it for me. The guy just can't get it done in the clutch. I mean, countless times. I can't even count the amount of times over the past 4 years that he's been the starting quarterback for the Hawkeyes that the game's been down to the wire. He's had the ball in his hands with a chance to win, a minute left inside the red zone, and the guy repeatedly just hasn't been able to get it done. And it's holding them back. They can't come up with a big win. I think 3 years in a row it happened against Penn State.
Yeah, I think this is a team that definitely benefits from being in the Big Ten West. They might not be as good as their record would indicate, and you could make the same argument for the Golden Gophers as well, although they've been winning games convincingly, and that's why I had that team ranked so high in my personal top 25, because they're not only winning games, they're winning games by a lot, and that to me shows that they are really one of the better teams in this conference, and I think we'll be able to see that in the coming weeks. But I agree with you on Iowa. 6-2 team, probably not going to be in the conversation for a conference championship or anything beyond that. So I agree with your assessment there.
The one thing about Minnesota, you mentioned being in the weaker conference in the Big Ten. Their best win is against Nebraska. Yes, they beat them 34-7. However, Nebraska, again, one of those teams that's just extremely disappointing. Adrian Martinez hasn't quite taken the steps that we've all expected him to take, in year 2 in Scott Frost's system. And, when you beat, look how else they beat. They beat Maryland 52-10, started out hot, haven't really done anything since. Illinois, yes, they beat Wisconsin a couple weeks ago, but they're still Illinois. And they only beat Purdue by 7. And that was a Purdue team without their best player, without their starting quarterback. That has to be somewhat alarming.
That is a bit of a red flag, but like they say, you just play who's on the schedule. They've had one bad game out of 8. To me, that means they're a pretty good team. And obviously, it's the Big Ten West. We all know that's the weaker of the 2 Big Ten divisions, but like I said, they've played who's on their schedule, and for the most part, they've looked pretty impressive. So until proven otherwise, I have to put them.
And I mean, damn it, if they went out and beat Ohio State in the championship game, they could find themselves in the Rose Bowl and heck, even the college football playoff. Probably not, but
this week is a proving week for the Golden Gophers.
Oh yeah, this is a huge matchup for them. We're gonna find out whether or not they're legit. And the same thing could be said for Penn State, because Penn State hasn't played a ton of competition. They should have lost to Pitt, and I mean, yeah, they beat Michigan, but again, I'm not too high on the Michigan Wolverines. I had them going into the playoff. We'll get to that in literally about 2 minutes, but yeah, and again, disappointing. 16 Kansas State.
So they did take care of Kansas this past week after beating OU, which is really like why they're ranked this high. If we're
that was a great game.
If we're being real, that's why they're ranked this high, and they still almost found a way to lose that game. They were up big in the 4th quarter, and OU almost mounted a comeback. There was a little bit of luck involved there for the Wildcats. This is a good football team. I like how the new coach has stepped in with huge shoes to fill and has built a solid program after a few years of mediocrity. But they've lost to teams that are lower down on this list. They lost to Oklahoma State earlier in the year. The win against Oklahoma was big, but there were still some holes there that you could pick up on. So I think this is probably about right for them. Again, they play in the Big 12, so defense has been a little bit of an issue. They still let up 41 points to OU in that game. There's definitely some things to like about this team. You can run the ball really well. You got a couple different backs they work in. Good quarterback play as well. But to me, this is a good team, not a great team.
Yeah, and Kansas State are the type of team that they don't play great offense. They don't play great defense. They play good enough. They really possess the football. Right here it says they're the 9th team in terms of possession. So with a senior quarterback like Skylar Thompson, he's not going to make a ton of mistakes. He can pick up first downs with his legs and obviously with his arm as well. And they're a very well-coached team. They can play a little bit of defense, which is really all it takes in the Big 12. If you can score points and play a little bit of defense, you can have a lot of success.
I mean, like you said, defense to stop the bleeding and then just come in with the offense. Typical Big 12 play. I mean,
Oklahoma.
solid team. Not much from me on Kansas State. Just got to take care of Texas this week.
Yeah. We'll see. Can Texas bounce back and maybe look like somewhat of the team that beat Georgia a year ago? Maybe. They have a lot of injuries, but we'll definitely see about that. Moving into the top 15, a bit of a crapshoot in this area because you got Notre Dame at 15, Michigan at 14, who blew them out a couple weeks ago, Baylor, who's another undefeated team, a lot like Minnesota, I'd say, at 13, Wisconsin, who got blown out by Ohio State, got beat by Illinois, are at 12, and then you got Auburn coming off a close win at number 11. Let's just start off talking about Wisconsin, Michigan, Notre Dame. Obviously, Wisconsin blew out Michigan. Then Michigan blew out Notre Dame. But against every other team, it's kind of been close. Like, obviously, Notre Dame just coming off of a close scare against Virginia Tech, and yet they took Georgia, a top 10 team, down to the wire a couple weeks ago. And then you got Michigan, who gets blown out by Wisconsin. They kind of keep it close with Penn State, and then they go out and blow out Notre Dame. It's just these teams are very, very up and down, and I don't know what to make of it because the play calling week to week, the performance week to week, the effort, it's different. You don't know what you're going to get out of them.
Well, for me, Michigan and Notre Dame are kind of in a similar situation in that these are teams with huge fan bases, huge name recognition that can't seem to win.
Two most winningest programs in NCAA history.
Exactly, and I think they're coasting on that reputation a little bit. I don't think that if we were talking about, like, let's say this is Kansas State and Iowa we're talking about. They're in the exact same position. They're not going to be this high in the countdown or in the top 25 because they don't have the history, the clout that a Michigan or a Notre Dame has. And this has been a theme under Jim Harbaugh in particular, where Michigan starts off the season really well, beats the teams they should beat, and then when they play the important games, they don't win them. They
blows
underachieve.
Up in their face.
This is exactly what's happening again this year. So I can't in good conscience put these two teams any higher than they are, and I can't see them contending either for that reason. I like Shea Patterson a lot, but he needs to play better than he did against Wisconsin. Those are the big games that you really need to get up for if you're going to play Big Ten football for Michigan or independent football for Notre Dame, whatever you want to call it. You need to win the big games.
Half ACC, maybe?
Yeah, something like that. But they need to win the big games, the ones that matter, that determine their season. And so far, they haven't done that.
Obviously, for Michigan, the Jim Harbaugh's job is probably going to come down to whether or not he can beat Ohio State, or at least keep it respectable.
Yeah, and, like, I don't see it happening. I can't remember the last time I saw Michigan beat Ohio State. I don't even know if I was alive yet. That's how long it's been. But you're definitely right.
I think it's like 1 in 9.
There's going to be some scrutiny on Harbaugh's job because the expectations in Ann Arbor are higher than what he's accomplished there. And it should be the same thing in South Bend for Brian Kelly as well. He has been there a long time, and he hasn't got a lot to show for it. So
they did go to the playoff last year. We have to give them credit for that. They do their defensive line. Yes, they lost Jerry Tillery. However, there are still some ballers on that. Ian Book, while he did have a rough game last week, is a solid quarterback. He can make all the throws you want at the college game, and he can also pick up yards and first downs with his legs.
That's how he won the game against Virginia Tech.
Bingo. The guy, he can pick up the first downs, he can scramble a little bit, extend plays. He's a good quarterback. There's some weapons on Notre Dame's team. It's just losing Dexter Williams and Jerry Tillery obviously have hurt this team. Then look at a guy like Drew Tranquill, who's actually playing pretty well for the Los Angeles Chargers right now. And the NFL, it hurts you. I thought this Notre Dame team was going to go blow out Michigan, like I said. They didn't do that. They haven't been playing good football recently. However, I do still think they are a good team, and I think they get too much hate from the last two playoff and national championship appearances that they've had that they got blown out in. And basically guys like Paul Feinbaum are out here saying they should never be allowed back in, which is just ridiculous.
I wouldn't go that far. I agree with you that this is a good team with good players. I like Ian Book a lot too. I don't think the last two games reflect his ability at all, but that's exactly why I'm bringing up the coach. They weren't ready to play that game against Michigan. They weren't ready to play against Virginia Tech either. That's why they had to claw their way back. So if you're Brian Kelly, you need to make sure your team's ready to play for those games. And that's what I'm saying. These are two teams that are in the exact same situation right now. They have to play better. And it's not just on the quarterback or on the players on the field. It comes down to the coach as well. So I think there's going to be some discussions about both of those guys at the end of the year.
Just real quick, I want to say, go off your original point about how Michigan and Notre Dame have that sort of like big-time winning clout that almost like an Alabama has. An aura around them. But they can't just get the job done. And I think that's their bane of existence right now in the middle of our rankings is that they just can't get those big wins and they can't secure that under their belt. And as they're coaching, it's like it comes with their coaching. They're disappointing. It's disappointing.
The talent that they have, they're putting out 8 to 11 win seasons over the past couple years, but they can't seem to make that jump to be a team pushing for the college football playoff.
Can't make it stick.
I mean, obviously Notre Dame made it to the college football playoff. Michigan was 1 yard away a couple years ago. So they have been there, but they can't get to that Ohio State, Clemson, and Alabama level, if you will. Wisconsin, bouncing off them. I mean, they blew out Michigan, and then they got blown out by Ohio State. Obviously, we all know Ohio State is really, really good, and they've shown it all year. But Wisconsin, they can run the ball. They just cannot seem to pick up the crucial third down passing plays they need. Jack Cohn, he's been okay, but at the same time, the guy in the clutch just can't get it done. They're way too run-oriented. There's not enough variety in their offense.
I agree. Jonathan Taylor is a very good player, but he can only take you so far. At some point, you need to be able to throw the ball, and quarterback play has been an issue with Wisconsin for years. We all remember Hornibrook and how much the fans complained about him. But as you mentioned, Cohn, like, they just need a better quarterback at the end of the day. And losing to Illinois is just inexcusable.
Yeah,
you brought that up earlier in the show. The Ohio State game, I think everybody understands that. Like,
for sure.
Ohio State hasn't had a close
sick
game all year. But you can't lose to Illinois and be taken seriously in the college football playoff. I'm sorry. Like, it was a fluke. It was a one-off, but there's no way they should have let that happen. Illinois should never be beating a team in the top 25, let alone at number 12 in the top 25. Like, let's be real.
It's too painful of a loss to give them any credit for what they've done and their status early in the season.
And like, they're not a bad team at all. Like, this is a team that can run the ball down your throat. They have a pretty good defense. They're a good team, but that one loss just hurts so much. If they had lost to just Ohio State, they would be in the top 10. But with that loss to Illinois on the record, you can't do that.
See, I think with the margin of loss that they had and the way in the last three quarters where they just got manhandled, I wouldn't have them in the top 10. However, like you said, they're a good team. They can run the ball. They possess the ball more than anyone else in the entire country. Jonathan Taylor is probably the best running back in the entire country. The guy's an animal. He's going to be... Just to put things in perspective, he rushed for more yards as a freshman than anyone in the history of college football. He rushed for more yards than anyone in the history of college football as a sophomore. And he's doing pretty darn good this year with 1,000 yards. Their defense flies around. Jim Leonard, heck of a defensive coordinator, former New York Jet. It's just when you know that they're going to throw the ball, you can stop them. They pack the box. Defenses will pack the front seven. You know, they'll send their safety. Only playing one deep safety, if that, against Wisconsin. And then when you need to throw the ball, Jack Cohn hasn't been able to get it done. They don't have the weapons on the perimeters, you know, to go make the plays to bail their quarterback out consistently, and it costs them.
And this has been a theme with Wisconsin again. We're talking a lot about themes here. They've always had good running backs. Always. For the last 20 years, Wisconsin's had good running backs. Monty Ball, Melvin Gordon, Taylor, obviously, as you mentioned, Ron Dane. The list goes on. But quarterback play has been an issue. The one year they had a good quarterback was the year they had Russell Wilson.
They won the Rose Bowl.
They went to the Rose Bowl, and they won. Exactly. Since then, nothing. You've had Joel Stavy, Alex Hornibrook, Jack Cohn, and you're getting nothing done. This team needs a passing game. I really think that's the missing piece for Wisconsin here, because their defenses have always been good too. They just need to be able to throw the ball. They've got to get themselves a quarterback. If they do that, they're going to be just fine. But right now, it looks like the same old story.
Going on from Wisconsin, we have at 12. We'll backpedal to a team that actually does throw the ball well and throw the ball a lot, and that's the Baylor Bears. Charlie Brewer, 14 touchdowns on the year, just over 2,000 yards, undefeated. Again, a lot like Minnesota. They've beaten a couple good teams out there. Oklahoma State's probably their best win. Iowa State, another good team. They beat Kansas State. But there's not really a signature win.
There's not. But let me tell you a little something about Charlie Brewer. So I went to high school in Texas, Jesuit Dallas High School, shout out. We played against this guy my junior year. He went to Lake Travis, same school as Baker Mayfield, obliterated our defense. It was not close. I think we lost by like 50 or something. I knew this kid was going to be a stud that day. He was already committed to Baylor. I'm not at all surprised this team is having success with Charlie Brewer under center. He's an excellent quarterback, and this team is going to go far with him. That being said, again, I'm hesitant to buy into this just because they haven't played a really, really good team yet. When they played Oklahoma State, they weren't ranked. When they played Kansas State, they weren't ranked. So it's hard to put too much weight into that. The next stretch of their schedule is going to be the real telltale. It's going to be Texas, who obviously is down right now. But still, if they beat Texas, that shows me that they don't fall into those trap games. They win the games they should win. And OU, Oh my goodness!
In 2 weeks.
If they can win that game, then it's time to have a whole nother conversation about the Baylor Bears. And honestly, I'm happy for them. It wasn't that long ago they went 1-11. It's amazing how quickly they've been able to turn this around. And
Matt Rule has done a phenomenal job.
For sure. Especially with what's recently come about in the program to rebound like this.
He was arguably Coach of the Year last year. I think for sure he's Coach of the Year this year. Well, at least in my opinion, in terms of where he started and where he's at now, no one touches it. Obviously, you can talk about a guy like Ryan Day in his first year who's just dominating. But to take a team from A to B, Matt Rule has done a phenomenal job, as has PJ Fleck, rowing the boat down up there in the cold Twin Cities in Minnesota.
Quick last point on Baylor.
Mm-hmm.
I think this TCU
upset alert.
This sneaky TCU team.
I was gonna say that when we
think,
did our game picks.
I think they're a little bit sneaky.
Is that why you're wearing purple and white today?
Definitely not. But I do think that a sneaky TCU team that managed to beat the Texas Longhorns could be a little bit of a trap for Baylor.
Yeah. At home, Gary Patterson, great coach. We've seen some great TCU teams. I was going to say that when we got to the game picks, but...
you have my opinion now.
Yep, you got your opinion. We don't even have to talk about that game. No, I'm kidding. We'll get those predictions later. Final team before we move into the top 10. Auburn. You go.
Okay, sorry, Chaz, to cut you off there. We talked about young quarterbacks earlier in the show, and Bo Nix honestly might be the best one. He's definitely had his struggles.
He is. He's the best one.
But the team has been good enough to mask some of that. They are a little inconsistent. Obviously, this week was a little bit of a scare. They almost lost to Ole Miss. They came through when it mattered. But at the end of the day, they're in the same spot they were last week, and I think that's fair. You can't knock them down after a win. But beating Ole Miss by 6 points, that's kind of a scare. You can't really move them up after that either. This team has a lot of potential, really good defense. I like Bo Nix a lot. He's still improving week by week, getting better with each game. Gus Malzahn, he's taken a lot of criticism in the past, but I think he's a solid head coach. And we mentioned there's a lot of good teams in the SEC. Obviously, one of their losses is Florida. They're a really good team. So it's kind of tough to gauge where they're at. They play in the SEC West, which is probably the toughest division in college football.
It is the toughest
doubt.
division. It's
no
not
doubt.
even close.
It's not even
For the
close.
people that argue that the Big Ten, I can't handle it. Like, as much as I'm a West Coaster, loving the Pac-12, grew up an SC fan, you just can't argue with 3 top 10. Well, Auburn's just outside the top 10. Team in one division that have to go all play each other. Sometimes within 4 weeks of each other.
Like you were saying, the Big Ten can be a little bit of a cluster, and there's obviously their traditional powerhouses in that. But a division that has LSU and Alabama in it cannot be denied.
Like you said, Game of the Century, Part 2, possibly this week. Going back to Auburn, we got to talk about their defense. Marlon Davidson's got 5.5 sacks on the year. The guy's an absolute stud. He's going to be the first-round pick sometime in the near future. They can get after the quarterback. They make things hard. When they go and play Alabama, it's going to be a tough game. It will be a tough game for Tua Tagovailoa, especially with his ankle injury, which is going to be a very big talking point for the game this upcoming weekend. And then Bo Nix. I love the guy. In the clutch, he's great. But, he's a freshman quarterback. At times, you're going to make mistakes. He's going to throw a dumb interception here and there. He's going to misread. Exactly. He's going to try and force something down the field that's not there when he should take off and run or check it down to his running back. Gus Malzahn, I think, has done a really good job putting him in positions to succeed. But, again, he's a freshman quarterback. They're going to make mistakes. Freshmen. When we were freshmen, we were stupid. Yeah. It just didn't necessarily, come out on national television.
Oregon, Florida, LSU, obviously great teams, but they've all proven that Bo Nix is human, and he's young, and he's a freshman, and he throws picks, and he doesn't always complete his passes. So.
And that may be true, but they still beat Oregon, and Oregon looks like they're the best team in the Pac-12 right now. That win gets underrated a lot, and with 2 losses, yes, they're probably out of the national title contention, but they could be one heck of a spoiler. We talked about the Iron Bowl, obviously. This team, if they play their best, has a good chance to beat Bama, especially if Tua's still nursing an ankle injury. If Mac Jones has to come in, I would be terrified as a Bama fan to see Mac Jones in front of this pass rush from Auburn. They could be a very interesting team to watch in the coming weeks. That being said, 2 losses likely puts them out of national title contention. They're going to need some serious help. But a good team they got down there.
One thing that's the most surprising thing I'd say about Bo Nix for me, or I wouldn't say surprising, but unusual thing you don't see out of freshman quarterback very often is how many games that they are close or that they have in close that he pulls out some little bit of magic to either get the win done. It didn't happen against LSU, but he put them in the position to win that football game. You just don't see that out of freshman quarterback. The kid's something special. Obviously, years down the road, we're talking next year, the year after that. This Auburn team with Bo Nix at the helm
could be something
scary,
dangerous.
especially with Lexa Tagovailoa leaving, Joe Burrow's leaving. You don't know. Is Mac Jones going to be the guy for Alabama next year? Is it going to be Tulia?
I've never shipped Alabama, but with a quarterback named Mac, I'm definitely all in.
Yeah. Hey, namesake. With the name Chaz, it's not as common. There's a guy, Chaz Dodd. He was a quarterback at Rutgers. He kind of sucked. But, yeah. Whatever. It happens.
Chaz is not well.
Or actually, no. Chaz Surratt. He spells it differently. 2 Z's. He was a quarterback at North Carolina. Now that Sam Howell's the guy, they moved him to the linebacker. He's Sage Surratt's brother. The Vanderbilt wide receiver. Or not the Vanderbilt. The Wake Forest wide receiver. So, yeah, a little bit of cool.
Very knowledgeable on your college football Chazes.
Yeah, I don't think there's ever been a quarterback named Evan. That's just not a quarterback name, I guess.
There definitely has.
I can't think of
as
any.
Far as us knowing him, I don't know about that.
No, not a relevant one anyway.
All right, we're going to move into the top 10, but I'm just going to read the top 10. Or actually, I'll read the top 10 for us. And then I'll read the college football top 10s, and then we'll each give our own top 10s, and then we'll break it down because this is really where the controversy starts to get down and how you determine who's better and who's worse. Do you take in conference, conference strength or what conference you play in, strength of schedule, the eye test, record obviously matters. That's really where your own personal, not bias, but how would I put this? What's the word for it? I don't know why I'm blanking on it.
Personal inklings?
Inklings, yes. Or just the way you rank your team. The way you perceive teams and how, if they don't come and play head-to-head, who you would choose. And even some people choose strength of schedule, record over head-to-head. It's not me, but it happens. All right, in our top 10, at number 10, we have the Florida Gators. Number 9, the Utah Utes. Number 8, Oklahoma. Number 7, Georgia. Number 6, Oregon. Number 5, Penn State. Number 4, Clemson. Number 3, Alabama. Number 2, Ohio State. And number 1, the LSU Tigers. In the college football playoff, top 10. Number 10, just like ours, the Florida Gators. Number 9, Oklahoma. Number 8, Utah. Number 7, Oregon. Number 6, Georgia. Number 5, Clemson. Number 4, Penn State. Number 3, Alabama. Number 2, LSU. And number 1, Ohio State. We'll start off with 10, Florida. Coming off a close loss to Georgia. Obviously, without Felipe Franks, it's been tough. Kyle Trask has done well. He's done well. Emory Jones, the talented backup, comes in every once in a while for a little bit of a dual threat option, goal line, 3rd and short, 4th and short type of situations. Obviously, their pass rush is something special. Whoever is the quarterback of the other team, it's going to frustrate them and make life difficult for them. But at the end of the day, again, they have 2 losses. And maybe with Felipe Franks, they pull that out. But like I said, without Felipe Franks, it seems like against the very best teams in the country, for as flawed as he was and as inconsistent as he could be at times, the guy could do some special things The guy could do some special things and pull out stuff out of nowhere.
Yeah, what I really like about Florida is how resilient they've been this year. Obviously, for all the criticism that Franks took, he's still a pretty solid quarterback, and he's their guy.
Year one of Dan Mullen.
You like to have that certainty under center. You want to know that your guy is going to be there for every game, and that hasn't been the case with this team. But they've altered their game plan to sort of accommodate that. They got a young guy in there, Trask, now, who's done pretty well. Dan Mullen's a good coach, and they've got a swarm on defense. They play a lot of close games. They don't necessarily have to put up a lot of points to win, and it's a winning formula. So that's why they're in the top 10.
Okay, yeah, and then another similar team, a little bit of struggles at the quarterback position, but Utah's D-line, legit. We all saw what they did to ASU. They basically took over that game, and ASU got the ball inside the 30, I believe, 3 or 4 times, and they got 3 points out of that.
Yeah, tough game for Sun Devil fans,
for sure.
Obviously.
Very painful one.
This Utah team came into the year with so much hype, and that D-line was a huge
Their defense can play with anyone in the country. There is no denying that. Whichever offense you put in front of that Utah defense, they're going to make life difficult because I don't know if there's an offensive line that can contain that pass rush. I don't. Maybe Oregon's. We'll see if both teams do end up meeting each other in the Pac-12 championship, which looks like they're on a collision course.
Pretty much inevitable.
To do. Yeah, it looks almost inevitable at this point. However, Tyler Huntley, he's been a little injured at times, throwing the ball down the field when you need to. A little bit of the same problem Wisconsin has, except for a little bit better. I'd take Tyler Huntley over Jack Cohn, due strictly down to the ability to run the ball that he has.
The schedule has also undoubtedly helped Utah pad their record a little bit. The one time that they were in the top 10 this year, they lost to unranked USC, and that's what has me concerned this coming week because, again, this is a team that plays a lot of close games. If they come out and they're not ready to play against a team that is prepared for them adequately and that is really motivated, I definitely see this team being susceptible to an upset. But that being said, it looks like they're the team to beat in the Pac-12 South. I wouldn't be surprised if they won out and met Oregon in the conference championship game. Like you said, that's how things seem to be going. But I didn't have them in my personal top 10, and that's kind of why. The lack of a statement win and the fact that they have had to eke out so many close wins makes me a little concerned about Utah.
I think the combination of Tyler Huntley and Zach Moss is just great for them, and I think that'll continue to give them offensive production. I think as far as staying in the top 10, I mean, like you said, the collision course with Oregon and the Pac-12, inevitable Pac-12 championship, in my opinion. I think they'll continue to ride this one out until they meet that collision course with Oregon and ride Tyler Huntley until then.
It's going to be cool to see that game. Hopefully we get to see that game. I really want to because obviously you have a team like Oregon who likes to spread the ball out, use their speed, get the balls on the perimeters. Justin Herbert, we know he's got an absolute cannon for an arm, probably going to be a first-round pick in the upcoming draft. And then you got a team like Utah, a little bit more old-fashioned, put a couple tight ends in the thing, ground and pound. Zach Moss over 800 yards rushing. I think he's got 11 touchdowns on the year as well. It's you got the differing styles, D-line versus O-line. I'm excited. I really hope it happens. And you know, I think if that's that game with both teams going into the Pac-12 championship game with one loss is the only way the Pac-12 gets a team in the college football playoff. Is if, let's say, Oregon's 11-1 or Utah's 11-1, and it's going to be whether or not you choose them over like an 11-1 Clemson, Penn State, maybe Alabama loses it, non-conference champion Alabama or LSU. That's going to be the toss-up. But moving on, Oklahoma. Big-time offense. Jalen Hurts.
I love Jalen Hurts, man.
How can you not love Jalen Hurts?
Him, man.
How can you not love Jalen Hurts? The guy stuck it out at Alabama. He was the backup to Tua for a year. Comes to Oklahoma under Lincoln Riley. We know what Lincoln Riley can do with quarterbacks. He is the best play caller in terms of offense in the entire country. They're going to put up points. Their defense has been a lot better this year. Their defensive coordinator obviously coming over from Ohio State, but they did just lose to Kansas State. Kansas State, a good football team, but you can't lose those games and when you got these many good teams in the top 4.
I think that game was really a wake-up call for OU because this is a team that had not been playing their best football for a while. I personally went to the Red River rivalry game this year, Texas OU. Jalen Hurts single-handedly kept UT in that game by making careless mistakes with the ball, fumbles, interceptions, questionable decisions. If you can force Jalen Hurts to stay in the pocket and make plays with his arm, you can beat OU. And that's really the one thing that K-State exploited. They also had a field day against OU's defense, put up 48 points. OU almost came back and won that game. So in the same game, they showed that they're both incredibly beatable and incredibly talented at the same time. It just depends which team shows up to play on that given day. The inconsistency is a little concerning, but they have so many good players. CeeDee Lamb is an absolute beast. You can't cover the man.
Don't sleep on Charleston Rambo either.
He's good. Talk about the year of the wide receiver. Come on, Jerry Jeudy, all the Alabama guys, Justin Ross from Clemson.
We'll talk about the Alabama guys.
We'll talk about the Alabama guys. We'll talk about the Clemson guys. You know, they even look at a team like USC's got 3 NFL wide receivers on their roster. It's like it is. There are so many good guys around the country, and when you got a play caller like Lincoln Riley, I mean, we saw what CeeDee Lamb did a couple weeks ago. And you could say Oklahoma was maybe a couple inches away from coming back and winning that football game against Kansas State. The onside kick, they got it, but what was it? They touched it almost maybe a foot before 10 yards?
The ball went like 9.5 yards, something ridiculous like that. But the fact that they even made that a game just shows how talented this team is, how loaded they are. If they're motivated, they can beat anybody. I truly believe that.
It's just whether or not they can hold the other team's defense to any, stop them at any downs, because they're gonna score a lot of points. It's just whether or not they can hold defense or hold the opposition's offense to a couple 3-and-outs, maybe force a stop here, punt there, missed field goal, turnover. You never know. But moving on, we'll do 7 and 6, or we'll do 7, 6, 5. Obviously, 7 we have Georgia, 6 Oregon, 5 Penn State. Georgia coming off the Florida win, really solid win for them. Obviously, the South Carolina loss, not too great. Ryan Helinski's in, the brother of the late Tyler Helinski, basically gifted them a win, and they could not get it done against South Carolina. How many times did they miss a field goal?
Very, very uncharacteristic for Blankenship. He doesn't normally do that. But
I'm talking about South Carolina. Like, South Carolina had the win locked up, and they gave Georgia so many chances to come back and win that football game, and they just didn't take advantage of it.
Mm-hmm.
Jake Fromm, like I said, I've been a little bit disappointed in him this year.
Yeah, that's really an inexcusable loss. Will Muschamp coach team, not ranked with their backup quarterback in.
Not a big Will Muschamp guy?
Well, good defensive coordinator at Texas. Since then, he hasn't really shown me a whole lot. The program hasn't really gotten better since he took over there. But that's an issue for another day. Another day when South Carolina is actually in the top 25, and that might be a while. But you have to win that game if you're Georgia. You have to win that game. And they would be undefeated if they did. That's the thing. This team was 3 points away from potentially being in the top 4, maybe even top 3 this week. So that's how stacked they are. And Fromm, he does take a lot of heat. He doesn't have the biggest arm, not the best decision maker, not the most dynamic guy. But he gets the job done 9 times out of 10. And that game was the one where he didn't do it. So obviously, they know that if they lose another game, they're probably out. They've got some motivation. They're well coached. I like Kirby Smart a lot. Obviously, we mentioned all the weapons they have on offense in the backfield, out wide. Defense is really good. This is a good team all around. I'm kind of surprised they're only number 7, to be honest, because you can make an argument they're better than some of these undefeated teams. I like Georgia a lot, but we'll see if they get it done and if they can get some help and potentially get into the top 4 by the end of the year.
I mean, I don't really have much to say on Georgia. I'm kind of on the same train with you. I mean, 2 big statement wins, against Florida and Notre Dame.
They're not out of the playoff for any sort of the imagination, because simple fact is they might be a 1-loss SEC champion that is beating either Alabama, LSU. And if you have that on your resume, you're going to the college football playoff.
Exactly. I mean, as far as their future goes, like you said, I think it's pretty much a set matchup between either the winner of the big game this week. And, I mean, like you said, it's potential. They still got a lot of potential for them. But moving on to Oregon, I'm excited about the Oregon Ducks.
Yeah. I mean, the one game that I'd be fearful that they could lose would be the game against Arizona State here in Tempe. I don't think they will lose that game, but, Tempe's no easy place to come and play. Herm Edwards, under his tenure, it's been a tough place to come and play. They play everybody close.
It's one of the hardest.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like, they play everybody close.
Exactly.
If they win or lose, it's going to be down to the wire. They're going to make you try and do something that you're not very good at. Oregon offensively is good at a lot of things. Obviously, Justin Herbert, 24 touchdowns, only 2 interceptions this year. He's taken a huge step forward in terms of his efficiency and his decision-making from last year to this year, completing almost 70% of his passes. C.J. Verdell, hell of a running back, almost 800 rushing yards on the year. And like I said, O-line, maybe the best in the country, maybe the best O-line in the country. I don't know if there's many arguments there. The one rough thing for Oregon is they did lose their leading wide receiver, tight end Jacob Breeland, for the rest of the year. We'll see how that affects them. It hasn't quite come back to bite them yet. However, Breeland has pretty much been Herbert's security blanket, if you will, so far this season.
Well, talk about a guy who's improved his draft stock. Herbert, he's been hyped as a potential.
How can you improve your draft stock from being the number 1 pick? He might have improved his draft stock and yet be drafted lower than where he might have been drafted last year.
I don't think he would have been the number 1 pick if he came out last year, but that's not what we're talking about right now. That's an issue for another day. This, for me, is the best team in the Pac-12. I like them a lot better than Utah. With or without Breeland, obviously, as you mentioned, Herbert loves to throw to him. I really like the progression I've seen from Justin Herbert this year. I think he's much better than he was at this point last year when, again, he was hyped to be potentially number 1 overall pick. This is a scary team for sure. And you mentioned how the game in Tempe might be a little bit of a trap. I agree with that, but I think this team's going to cruise into the Pac-12 championship game. I really do. The fact that they were able to play Auburn, a team from the SEC West, which, as we mentioned, best division in college football, so close in week 1, and they have gotten better since then, just really says it all for me about this team. I like Mario Cristobal. He's built a great team up there, really well coached. When you got a guy like Herbert, you got a chance to win every game, and I think Oregon will have a chance to win every game.
That Auburn loss, you said the Auburn loss. That's as good of a loss as you probably can get in terms of an out-of-conference loss. I mean, unless you're losing to Alabama, LSU, Ohio State, there's not much of a better team in week 1 to lose to in a close, down-to-the-wire game. Like, that might not be held as much against them as if Penn State loses to, Wisconsin.
And I think that's a loss that definitely lights your fire as a player. Like, it motivates you to be better.
It's that could have been a statement game.
Exactly. Like, you think to yourself, oh, we were so close to getting that one. And, you move on to that and you just tackle the rest of the Pac-12 and you just... I think they went out. And I think it's sourced from that spark, from that close loss, and that motivation from that.
Before we go to the top 5... what did you guys have for your top 6s? If you just read it off real quick so we can see where we're at as we discuss the top 5, because Clemson was not above Penn State in the original college football playoff rankings, and yet in ours we have Clemson ranked above them.
For me, my top 6 is LSU, Alabama, Ohio State, Penn State, Clemson, and Georgia. So I have Penn State above Clemson, and I have LSU on top of everybody, just like we do.
Mine is pretty different. I had Ohio State number 1, LSU number 2, Bama number 3. Those three teams obviously very close together. Clemson 4, Penn State 5, and Oregon 6. That's how much I like Oregon. I really believe in this team a lot.
Yeah, and then I had LSU number 1, the best team in the country so far this season. People can tell you it's Ohio State. It's LSU. It's LSU so far this season. I had Ohio State, who I think's been the second best team on the field so far this year, at number 2, Alabama 3, Clemson 4, the 2 most talented teams in the entire country. And then I had Penn State 5, Oregon 6. I think Oregon is probably a better team than Penn State. I think Georgia and Oklahoma are also probably going to be better teams than Penn State. With that being said, Penn State is undefeated. They've gotten the job done. and Sean Clifford has been improving all year. Their defense is legit, and they deserve to be there.
It's hard to argue with an undefeated record in the Big Ten East. I will say that they've beaten some big-name teams like Michigan. Their defense is very good and is the reason they've won a lot of those games. Lots of very low-scoring, close games with the Nittany Lions this year. Clifford, he's been very efficient, taking good care of the ball. The one concern
He's not Trace McSorley. He's not going to go and win you a football game.
The wizard.
That's exactly what I was going to get at, Chaz.
There's no home run. They don't have a Saquon Barkley, Miles Sanders.
Exactly.
Don't get me wrong. The wideouts can ball. KJ Hamler, beast. That dude, Michigan could not cover him. Don Brown could not scheme up something to stop him. They couldn't, put a double coverage with the safety help over the top. He torched them. And he's going to torch pretty much every defensive back he faces. It's going to be a great matchup once he goes up against Jeffrey Okudah. I can't wait to watch that. That will be phenomenal. But again, not having a quarterback that can go win you a game against a team like Ohio State can really cost you. And again, I haven't been completely sold on them. Well, that's why I have Clemson above them. Yes, Clemson hasn't been completely sold. I haven't been completely sold on Clemson. Clemson has not played to their fullest potential this year. But Penn State, I don't know what to make of them. Or no, I do know what to make of them. Correction. I haven't seen something that would warrant me putting them over Clemson, being that they haven't played the best schedule so far this year.
You're making me second guess my rankings because I think that's a really good point.
Again, they beat Michigan, but Michigan started to come back at the very end. Michigan's not a very good first half team. You got to look at these type of things, and it's just I haven't the Pitt losses or the Pitt win. Pitt could have and should have won that game. It's just more concerning things for me. And like I said, I think if Oregon and Penn State played today, I think Oregon wins.
I think you and I are on the same wavelength here, Chaz. To me, their spot in the top 5 is predicated entirely on them being 8-0, being undefeated. The second this team loses a game, I think they're going to drop a lot because if they're not undefeated, it's really hard to justify putting them this high. Again, as you said, that loss to Pitt, it feels like they have a game like this every year. I remember a couple years ago they almost lost to, App State, week 1, really close
Pretty much
game.
always almost lose to Iowa, but Nate Stanley throws a dumb pick somewhere.
Almost.
That has been a theme as well. But this to me is a team that just hasn't really been tested yet. And I think that when they do get tested by those juggernaut teams in their division, cough, cough, Ohio State, cough, cough, there's some of their weaknesses are going to show, and it's going to result in them dropping.
And when you said the showing the weaknesses, that's where not having a guy like Trace McSorley, Saquon Barkley will bite you.
That's what I was going to say. The absence of that almost home run dynamic sort of highlight player.
Game winner. Just a guy that'll go,
guy and go get it done for you whenever
play
you
goes
need
to
it.
complete crap. Someone's got to, make a throw. KJ Hamler will go and get the ball. But if the pocket collapses and Sean Clifford's got to either stand in there and take a shot or, make somebody miss and pick up a first down with his legs, I don't know if he can do that going up against Ohio State and Chase Young.
Chase Young's a monster.
He's the best, one of the best defensive players in the country. Arguments could be made for Grant Delpit. We'll see if he's able to go this week against Alabama. Great safety. Moving on to Clemson. A team that we know is really good. There's so much talent, and yet we haven't seen them play to their full potential against a solid opponent. Their schedule's been pretty boof. The best team they've played this year has been Texas A&M, who has 3 or 4 losses this year. Obviously, playing in the SEC West has a big part to do with that. But the North Carolina escaping the loss there is not...
Escape is the right word.
It wasn't... Again, that game could have gone to overtime. I love the call by Mac Brown going for it. But...
For sure.
A better play call offensively, and Clemson's got 1 loss. And they're probably behind the likes of Oregon and Georgia.
A huge hit in the rankings if they lost that game to North Carolina, but they didn't.
And that would be a huge hit to their playoff chances because the ACC is so weak.
Yeah, for me, with Clemson, it's just a case of wake me up in late December, early January. this team's season, whether it's a success or not, is going to depend entirely on whether they're in the playoff at the end of the year. All they have to do is win their remaining games, and they're in, because, like you said, the ACC, not a whole lot of depth there, especially the Coastal Division where Clemson plays. They're really kind of a standalone team there. Wake Forest this week, I don't see that as being much of a test for them at all. I think we all know who the better team is. So really, unless they get in their own way, I think this is a team that probably wins the ACC, and
all I want to say before we move on to whatever, this Wake Forest win, if they win this game, will be their second best win of the season. That's how weak the ACC is this year. It's just kind of funny being that, like, a couple years ago, I don't know if you guys remember them at Media Days being like, oh, the premier conference in college football. Every single coach said that. And they made a statement to be like, oh, we're like the SEC. We're like the Big Ten. And yet, now you have Clemson, and then literally everybody else is just meh.
You also have to factor in that Florida State was
incredible
years ago. And what a collapse.
Oh, Willie Taggart put
what a collapse.
Oh, that
goodbye.
That was an absolute dumpster fire, and we can talk about that. I mean, I would talk about him being fired, except for the fact that it was an absolute no-brainer. The guy was at Oregon. He got the Florida State job after Jimbo Fisher jumped ship to
Texas
Aggieland.
Yeah.
For a boatload of money.
Oh, yeah.
So much money.
The cha-ching definitely had something to do with that.
For sure.
But whoever the next Florida State head coach has got his work cut out for him, because that program, while there is some talented guys on that roster, and obviously you're in one of the biggest recruiting hotspots for football in the entire country in the state of Florida, so your program could be turned around within a couple years. I mean, the fan base ain't happy. It's just...
Five-star D tackle Marvin Wilson, who went to my rival high school, got surgery on his hand today, and he's done for the rest of the season. So that's another hit to them.
But, I mean, FSU's season ended a while
exactly.
ago.
But then we're not here to talk about that. But
I feel bad for the guy, but it doesn't affect the team really. They were dead in the water before the year even started. But yeah, they got some rebuilding to do in Tallahassee.
Now the top three is really where the controversy comes down to. Alabama, we have at 3. Ohio State at 2. LSU at 1. The committee has as Ohio State at 1 and LSU at 2. Alabama, we've seen them play really well. They just haven't been tested. They truly had not been tested.
Oh, and they're taking the final exam of their lives coming up this week.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God.
And then you got a team like Ohio State. They've blown everybody out. They've looked really good doing it. And then you got a team like LSU that's just gone through an absolute gauntlet and come out on top. We'll start with Alabama. Tua Tagovailoa's ankle injury. That's obviously a concern. It has to be a concern. He struggled with an ankle injury last year, and the guy just wasn't the same on it. You saw the Georgia game. You know, he's more prone to mistakes. He's not as what's the word for it? He's not as...
He's vulnerable.
He's more vulnerable. He's not as elusive in the pocket. He can't roll out the same. He's not as much of a weapon with his legs, and it hinders what he can do. And it really cost him. With that being said, he's got a great running back in Najee Harris. He's got probably the best receiving core in the entire country with Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs, and Devonta Smith.
And Jalen Waddle.
Don't forget Jalen Waddle.
Who's also from my rival high school, but carry on.
Oh, but you want to talk about rival? I understand rival high schools. When I was at my high school, Tesoro, Division I, California, Modern Day, I believe, beat us 70-0 in the first round of playoffs one year. So,
I mean, I wasn't trying to one up.
No. I'm telling you, like, believe me.
I hear you.
I get when you're saying.
I just think it's a fun point.
You went to a Texas high school too, right?
I did. Our rivals weren't very good. Thankfully, we benefited from that. Like the best guy we played against was probably Charlie Brewer. Honestly, if I had to pick somebody from all 4 years, it'd probably be Charlie Brewer or LaVisca Chenault, but they weren't in our division. DeSoto is like in a league of their own. But playing Modern Day, that's just not fair. Like Modern Day is not a high school. They're just like a football team that happens to be a school as well.
It's like a JUCO almost.
No, it's their entire like starting lineup is Division I. I mean, I guess the same could be said for like a team. I was gonna say Bishop Gorman, and yet Mater Dei beat Bishop Gorman earlier, 42-0. So, yeah.
I have the same number of state title rings as Jalen Waddle, but we'll leave it at that.
Hey. Hey, you know what?
Anyways, back to the receiving core of Alabama.
Back to the receiving core of Alabama. You can't cover them. You just can't. You try.
Too many weapons.
You put safety help over to Jerry Jeudy's side, and next thing you know, you have Henry Ruggs on a 1v1 with a cornerback.
Or you have Devonta Smith going off for
in the slot
hitting touchdowns.
I mean, it's incredible, and it's a testament to how good of a recruiter Nick Saban is. And obviously, whoever you are, I don't care who you are, the best defense in the country. NFL defenses probably have trouble covering the four of them. Because chances are the four of them are going to be in the NFL in a couple years. But then you got a team like Ohio State. Absolutely blown out everybody.
They have not had a close game all year. And, like, for a guy who hadn't played a down of college football before this year, Justin Fields looks really, really good.
He played a good amount last year for Georgia. He played more, garbage time, situational, third and shorts type of run plays. But he did play in more games than the redshirt role.
His sample size was much smaller, but he still was successful in the time he played.
That's my mistake then. But for a guy to just come in, first year with the program, start immediately, he's done pretty well. Like, no one's going to complain about his play, and that's an understatement. They have blown out everybody. They won a game 76-5. 76-5. That's not fair. I don't know how the other team got 5 points, but that's beside the point. They have been obliterating the competition, and it doesn't matter who it is, whether it's Miami of Ohio or Wisconsin. They've gotten the job done very, very impressively. And Chase Young, I mean, the guy is just not human. You can't block this guy. You can't stop him, whether it's run, pass, even special teams.
Jack Cohn will have nightmares.
6'5", 265, 13.5 sacks.
The fact that there are people who are talking about him as a Heisman front runner as a defensive end is just insane to me. Like, this guy is so dominant at what he does. He's such a weapon for them. And they really don't even need him to win, it seems like. Obviously, he's a dominant player. Obviously, he's going to be a threat to get in the backfield on every play. But they don't need him to win games. And that is the scariest thing about this team. They're just really, really good at football.
The Buckeyes have had an absolute conveyor belt of defensive ends. Obviously, the two Boses, and we've seen what they've done in the NFL.
Tearing it up.
I mean, they're both the AFC and NFC Defensive Player in the week in the same week, which is pretty amazing. And then don't forget a guy like J.K. Dobbins, one of the better running backs in the entire country. He's going to be playing on Sundays maybe next year or the year after. So this Ohio State team is loaded. They've blown out absolutely everybody. With that being said, I think the fact that LSU went to Texas, who at the time was a top 10 team, won on the road in Texas convincingly. Florida, they beat Florida convincingly. They beat Auburn, a very, very good team. This LSU team has just been so good. I love Coach O. I am all over the LSU Tiger bandwagon. I have been since that Texas win. When I saw Joe Burrow and the steps that he's taken from last year to this year, he's already doubled his touchdowns from last year. He had 16 last year. He's already got 30 this year. He's the Heisman frontrunner. I mean, at the beginning of this year, I was saying, oh, he's the most improved player in college football. Yeah, he's the most improved player in college football, and yet he might be the best player in college football.
You mentioned that Texas game at the beginning of the year. For me, that's really when this whole thing started because they were really suffocating under the heat of Texas. Like, there were so many players cramping on the field, leaving the game with cramps.
It was a really hot night that night.
They really struggled to play to the finish in that game, and I feel like that really helped them rally, get their stuff together, and now they've won 8 games in a row. And, like, let's not forget, they won that game by a touchdown. If Keontae Ingram catches an easy pass in the end zone from Sam Ehlinger on 4th down, that game went to overtime. Mm-hmm. Since then, they haven't been in a situation like that. This is a team that adapts incredibly well to their opponents. They learn from their mistakes, and they're just really talented in general. Now, we mentioned there's some uncertainty as to whether Grant Delpit's going to play this week. Obviously, We mentioned how deadly Alabama's receiving core is. If he's not there in the secondary to safety spot, that's going to make a difference. And Michael Divinity Jr. also not going to play in this game
Correct.
for LSU. So there are some cracks starting to form. That shouldn't affect their ranking, but I am a little bit concerned about their prospects of winning this week because of that. Obviously, Joe Burrow's a beast. Obviously, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is a beast. Obviously, they're gods in the trenches. This is a very, very deep team, very well-rounded, well-coached, well-everything. But are they going to beat Bama? That's the question everybody has. I don't know. Their track record against Bama is a little spotty. I get it's a different year, but I'm kind of getting some sense of deja vu here with the Tigers.
One thing I can tell you that you will know is they're going to be ready to play. And that's what Coach O does. He's one of the best recruiters, one of the best motivators in the entire country. I mean,
I'm having a press conference.
Yeah. I mean, the guy is just, I love Coach O. And the biggest mistake that USC made as a program in recent years was not hiring him on as their head coach.
That is true. He's infinitely better than Clay Helton, but he belongs in Baton Rouge. He is
100%.
He is the embodiment of LSU.
Of Death Valley.
He's a good Cajun man from La Rose, Louisiana, knows his football, French-speaking, lived in Louisiana his whole life, great motivator, great players coach. He belongs there, and I'm so glad that they're having this type of success under Coach O, and I really hope they win this game. But if they're missing Delpit and Divinity, it's going to be really tough. I have no doubt in my mind they're going to be mentally ready to play this game. But Bama is a juggernaut. They are the gold standard. 1 minute, Chas. They're the gold standard of college football. So LSU really is going to have to come out swinging in order to win this game.
Mac, you were the only one, or no, actually, you were the only one, Evan, that had Ohio State above LSU. Why did you pick Ohio State above LSU?
For me, it's really just how dominant the Buckeyes have looked. It's not a shot at LSU at all. I recognize that this is an incredibly good team. Easily number 2 in the country. I didn't think about putting them any lower than that, but I've just been so impressed with how the Buckeyes have played this year. They've really won me over, and the fact that they're doing it without Urban Meyer on the sideline is even more impressive. You've got a fairly inexperienced coach there, and
he's inexperienced, but he's done great. Ryan Day's done a great job.
He has, but it's still really impressive to me what they've been able to do up there in Columbus. They just have so many dominant players, and honestly, you could make a really convincing argument for LSU. I just felt like with what I've seen so far, Ohio State has looked like the best team. Now, obviously, the really big games have yet to be played, so we're going to get a little bit better idea of that as the season goes on. But for me, just what I've seen from the Buckeyes, in my eyes, they were the number 1 team. And that's the best way I can put it.
And for me, like I said, I believe LSU is the best team in the country. I believe that for weeks now. And obviously Ohio State's been impressive. You cannot deny that. But the fact of the matter is LSU has beaten elite teams. And they've beaten elite teams, and they haven't looked like they're going to lose those games.
That's where I was going to come in. I was going to say that those wins over Texas, Florida, and Auburn are just such big stamps on their record that are so
Ohio State doesn't have one.
Ohio State doesn't have that.
They don't have one signature win yet. Okay, yes, you could say Wisconsin. All right, they have one signature win. LSU's got 3 of them.
And big-time signature wins.
Exactly.
I understand.
On the road wins.
I understand what you guys are saying, and I fully respect the value of those 3 wins that LSU was able to rack up. But for me, it's just a matter of time before Ohio State gets one. Just like you have to play who's on your schedule. They've done that, and they've beaten everybody by a country mile. I am salivating for them to play a really good team, not Michigan or Penn State. I want to see them in the playoff, and I think they're going to give LSU or Alabama or whoever it is a run for their money. I really like what I've seen from them. But if LSU beats Bama this week, it's going to be hard for me to make that argument again. They beat 4 really good teams this year, then I'll start considering LSU the best team in the country. But right now,
hold on. If LSU beats Alabama this week, and people are still putting Ohio State above LSU, I don't care how good you think LSU or Ohio State has been. If LSU wins, if they're not ranked the number 1 team by you, there's something wrong.
You also have to factor in the fact that Ohio State still hasn't played Penn State. They still haven't played Michigan. Those are the 2 ones on the back end of their schedule. And this week's potential win for LSU over Alabama would jump them up there before Ohio State has had that opportunity to play those big games.
The same thing
against
goes
Penn
for
State and
Alabama.
Michigan.
The same thing goes for Alabama. The winner of this game should be the number 1 team in the country because
completely
no
agree.
other team has a better win on their record. Both have been incredibly impressive in all their things. Both are loaded in terms of talent. And like I said, I think LSU, for what I've seen so far, has been the best team in the country. I'd say Ohio State would be second, but beating each other, that has to boost your resume for the playoff, if you will.
Ohio State will continue to cruise for 2 more weeks before
they have
that big challenge, like LSU and Alabama have that challenge against each other this weekend.
And that's a fair argument. I understand why you guys are making this argument, but I can only report like what I've seen with my eyes. And what I've seen with my eyes is Ohio State coming out week in, week out, just dominating the opposition. None of their games have been close. And I get LSU has beaten the better teams, but I truly believe that if Ohio State had played LSU's schedule, they would still be 8-0. And there's no way I can prove that, granted, but that's just how I see it. So if Ohio State comes out in the next couple weeks, they lay an egg against one of these teams they should beat, I look dumb. That's fine. But I really think Ohio State's the best team. And until I'm proven otherwise, I'm going to stick to that. I'm going to stick to my guns. This is the hill I'm going to die on.
All right. Got a good little debate there. Now we're going to move into a little bit of juicy part of the show, if you will. No, I'm kidding. That was really weird. But, yeah, let's hope that never shows up. No, I'm kidding.
Juicy.
I am definitely cutting this part out. I am 100% cutting this part out. I just need to find it somewhere.
Yeah,
good luck
finding
now
it.
After that debate that we just had over, the top 4, and that'll be the big debate going for the rest of the season is who's more deserving, seedings and all of that. Obviously, come selection day will be the most intense, most likely. With that being said, a lot of the stuff will work itself out. One of the weeks that's going to work itself out is going to be this week. And now we're going to get into our game picks. Mac, who do you like? Penn State versus Minnesota. Can the Golden Gophers show that they are for real and get the win? They're at home.
I think they'll make a case for it, but I just think Penn State is just going to run away from it at the end. They'll make a case, but like you said, no real home run hitter for Penn State, but I just think the amassed amount of talent that they have is superior to Minnesota, and they'll just take it.
I like Penn State as well, but again, I think it'll be a close game. The defense is really going to be the deciding factor, I think, in this one. Penn State's defense absolutely swarming. They should be able to stifle the Golden Gophers' rushing attack, and I definitely see the Nittany Lions winning this one.
All right, next game. Team we mentioned might be on upset alert. The Baylor Bears travel to Fort Worth to take on the TCU Horned Frogs. Evan.
I like Baylor. I like Charlie Brewer. Baylor hasn't been 9-0 in a really long time. The fans in Waco are definitely going to be excited for this one. I have no doubt that the Bears are going to come out guns a-blazing in Fort Worth against a TCU team that has underachieved this year. So
they're only favored by 2.5 points. That does have to be said.
This is where I come in and I pick TCU over Baylor because I don't know a ton about TCU, to be fair, but that big win over Texas has a lot of momentum coming into this. They're in Fort Worth. The stadium is going to be purple and white, just full of it. And I think there's going to be a lot of momentum coming in, and I think it might be a trap for Baylor.
That stadium sucks, by the way.
It's 100% a trap game. It is 100% a trap game. And I think the Horned Frogs are going to get it done as well. So, I think Baylor suffers their first loss of the year. Obviously, they still have not played Oklahoma yet. They might even play them twice this season in the Big 12 championship. Moving on to another Big 12 game, Kansas State, Texas. Texas obviously not playing their best football right now. Kansas State's playing some pretty darn good football right now. Obviously, the Oklahoma win. They beat Mississippi State on the road earlier in the year. It is in Austin, which obviously gives Texas a little bit of a home field advantage. With that being said, I do think K-State does get it done. Evan, how about you?
See, this is tough for me because I come from a Longhorn family, so I really want to pick Texas, but I've watched their games over the past 3 weeks, and I've not been impressed. I got to go with K-State here. Texas barely beat the other Kansas school, the one that wears blue and red. They're not very good at football. They only beat them by 2, so I can't see them beating a Kansas State team that's currently in the top 25 that just beat OU. Whether it's in Austin or not, this Texas team is beat up right now. Their confidence is not high. I like the Wildcats.
I'm in agreement with you, Evan. Also coming from a Longhorn family, I'm not in favor of Texas in this one. They're reeling off a bad 3 weeks, lost to Oklahoma in the Red River rivalry, barely sneaking out with a win against Kansas. And I saw somewhere that equates to like a 20-point loss to a ranked opponent somewhere. But and then also a loss from TCU. Nah, Texas is not getting it done this week. Wildcats all the way.
Real quick, Wisconsin, Iowa. Go, Evan.
I like Wisconsin. It's a battle of mediocre quarterbacks for sure, so I have to favor Jonathan Taylor and that defense in this one. Taylor, I think, is going to have himself a day against that Hawkeye defense. I like the Badgers.
I'm pretty much same point as Evan. I'm going Badgers. Jonathan Taylor's going to stand out, and he's going to get the win.
I agree. I think it's going to be close. I think the Badgers get it done running the football, possess the ball more than anyone in the entire country, have the best statistical defense in the entire country. And like I said, Nate Stanley, he ain't clutch. Moving on. 2 teams that I think might be on upset alert. I'm not calling the upsets. Missouri, Georgia. I think Missouri could upset Georgia. Kelly Bryant quietly having a very, very good year. Almost 2,000 passing yards, 14 touchdowns through the air. We know what he can do with his legs as well. And then Iowa State, Brock Purdy, one of the leading passers in the entire country. He's got 15 touchdowns on the year, 2,500 passing yards. And Matt Campbell's team gives Oklahoma trouble. They have for the past couple years. I think they keep it close again. Do they win? I don't know. What do you guys think? Do either of these teams, all I'd say is, do either of these teams get the upset?
I don't think so, especially not Missouri. Missouri does not scare me. Kelly Bryant, he is having a good year. The team around him is not. They've had some very iffy losses in there, like Wyoming and Vanderbilt. I can't see them beating Georgia.
I'm in agreement. I don't think either team on upset alert gets upset. I just don't think it's going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen to Georgia. I don't think it's going to happen to Oklahoma. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, I tried to build up the suspense there. I think they're both going to – I think both Georgia and Oklahoma are going to win. I don't think it's going to be easy, especially for Oklahoma. I really am a big fan of Matt Campbell. But, like I said, they already have a loss. So you know that Oklahoma, they're going to be motivated and they're going to be ready to go. So, yeah, I think they do end up getting it done in Norman.
Jalen Hurts is going to rip them apart.
Oh. Yeah, the Iowa State defense this year has been a little bit disappointing, to say the least. And now, obviously, the big game. Evan, the Crimson Tide or the Tigers? It's in Bryant-Denny. Tua injury, though, question mark. We're not going to know how he is.
I've been thinking about this in the back of my mind for the entire show, and I still don't really know who I think is going to win. For me...
All you got to say is a team and a score. Just draw the line.
For me, it all depends on whether or not Grant Delpit plays for LSU. I'm going to say, for example's sake, that he does play. Let's say LSU is at full strength minus Michael Divinity Jr., I still like Bama in this game. That if Tua plays even injured, I like Bama in this game. I like Nick Saban against the school he used to coach at. He's got a great record against LSU. Bama is so deep, so talented, so good, and in front of the home fans in Tuscaloosa, I can't in good conscience not pick the Crimson Tide to win this game.
Where I think this gets really interesting is when you look at Alabama previous home losses. And I think LSU has a lot to learn from that. I think to win this game, Joe Burrow needs to be like Chad Kelly, needs to be like Johnny Manziel, 2 of the most recent winning quarterbacks in Tuscaloosa.
Bo Wallace too. Turn it back a little bit.
For LSU to win, Joe Burrow needs to be absolutely impeccable. And I think he will be. And I'm going to go with LSU over Alabama. Stealing a road win and making their statement for the playoff.
Yeah, Joe Burrow, I've been saying it all year, is the reason that LSU can beat Alabama. I've been saying it all year. I mean, I think that the offense that they're running now, with the more of a spread look, They got wide receivers on the outside with Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson, obviously the brother of an LSU quarterback that did beat Alabama and Jordan Jefferson back in the day. They got a good running back in Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I've been saying I think they could. I do think they will this week. I think they get it done. I think Joe Burrow cements his spot as the Heisman frontrunner. I think it's a big day from Joe Burrow. And heck, I think Justin Jefferson, like his brother, gets it done. I like the Tigers. I can't wait to watch this game on my phone from Tempe Stadium, or Sun Devil Stadium in Tempe, for our Parents' Weekend game here at ASU. Are you guys' parents coming out?
No.
Nah, I'm going home for Thanksgiving in a couple weeks. That's good enough for them.
All right, California. I'm going home, but California is a little bit closer. They're just driving out.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'll be watching it from my phone. I'm sure you guys will be watching it from a much better venue with much better views. But I'm sure everyone in their good mind, if you like college football, you are going to be watching the game of the century, quote-unquote, part 2. And, yeah, this is the playoff committee for Chas Messman, Evan Oscherwitz, and Mac Friday. Enjoy. Peace!